I've never been the kind of man to lose my temper until now. The HOA, with their endless rules and self-righteous attitude, decided to tear down the last thing my father built before he passed away. They called it a safety hazard. What they didn't expect was that I'd do something that would cost them far more than they ever imagined. They thought they held all the control. They were wrong. Let's just say, after what came next, their safe community didn't feel so safe anymore. I pulled into my driveway expecting a normal day at Carter Marine Logistics, the water transport company my father had built from scratch over 3 decades. Instead, I found a crew of contractors with chainsaws dismantling the wooden bridge that connected my property to the main lake. It wasn't just any bridge. My father and I had spent 3 summers building it together before his cancer diagnosis, carefully fitting each joint, selecting each plank with care, and driving every nail with the patience that comes when someone is teaching you that some things are worth doing right the first time. And there she was, Martha Crowley, overseeing the destruction with a clipboard in hand, her perfectly styled blonde hair untouched by the breeze. That smug expression she always wore at home meetings hadn't changed. It was the look of someone convinced they were doing the Lord's work while making other people's lives miserable. When she saw me step out of my truck, she actually smiled, a sharp, knowing smile, the kind you give someone right before you deliver bad news. She lifted her clipboard like a weapon. Perfect timing, Daniel, she said with satisfaction. I wanted you to understand what's happening here. We filed emergency permits over the weekend, citing structural hazards and community impact. Your bridge has been ruled unsafe and frankly an eyesore that drags down property values. Every buzz of the chainsaw felt like an insult to my father's memory. I stood there, helpless, watching the final piece of his craftsmanship splinter into the lake. I knew this wasn't about safety. Martha had been pushing her marina development plan for over a year, trying to convince the community we needed a centralized docking facility with professional management. Destroying my bridge wasn't just about rules, it was about control. As long as I had direct water access from my property, I could operate my business without paying her fees or playing by her rules. She wanted that leverage. You'll have to rent dock space from us now at market rates. Of course, she said, her voice practically dripping with dollar signs. We're in talks with investors. Once the marina is complete, you'll have access to much better facilities than this old wooden structure. She gestured toward the wreckage like she was doing me a favor. I wanted to unload every thought in my head, but I kept my mouth shut. Sometimes, letting them think they've won is the smartest move. The real blow wasn't even the financial loss, although my business relied on moving materials directly across the lake. Without the bridge, I'd be forced to truck everything to the public boat launch, adding hours to each job and bleeding away my competitive edge. The worst part was losing the last physical reminder of the summers I'd spent with my father, working side by side, building something meant to last. That evening, my friend Grant Holbrook called and invited me to Murphy's Bar. Grant worked for the Port Authority, and he knew more about local water management than most people realized. Over a couple beers, he told me something that made Martha's timing crystal clear. The HOA had approached the previous dam owner months earlier, hoping to form a partnership, but got turned down. Now, Granite Shore Incorporated was selling the dam because of rising maintenance costs and environmental regulations. If Martha gets wind of this, she'll try to buy it herself, Grant warned. If she controls both the marina and the dam, she'll control everything: water levels, docking rights, you name it. She could dictate terms to every property owner on this lake. It all fell into place. She wasn't just after the commercial traffic, she wanted control over the entire lake. Later that night, I walked to the narrow channel where my father's bridge had once stood. Debris still floated in the water, splintered pieces of wood that once held so much meaning. As I stared at the current pushing through the wreckage, something shifted in my mind. I'd been so focused on the bridge itself that I hadn't thought about what made it necessary. The water flowing underneath wasn't just a scenic view, it was a resource controlled by someone. And whoever controlled the dam controlled the lake. That's when it hit me: Martha's playbook wasn't about the bridge at all. The real power was in the dam. And if I could take that, I could take everything. The news about the dam sale sent me into full research mode. I shut myself away in my office for 3 straight nights, combing through files, public records, and online databases. Every new document felt like another piece of a puzzle clicking into place. People often think logistics is just moving goods from one location to another, but the real skill lies in understanding the systems behind it, knowing how they function, where the pressure points are, and exactly who has the authority to make changes. Water management, I discovered, was simply another logistics system, only this time most people didn't pay attention until something went wrong. Granite Shore, Incorporated had controlled the dam for 15 years, but the rising costs of environmental compliance were eating away at their profits. Recent updates from the EPA meant stricter requirements for discharge monitoring, habitat protection, and water quality checks. What used to be a straightforward way to collect fees from lakefront owners had turned into an expensive regulatory maze requiring specialized equipment and certified staff. The financial reports I uncovered in their liquidation documents showed they were staring at more than $200,000 in immediate upgrades just to meet existing standards. The real breakthrough came when I contacted Calvin Ross, an independent dam engineer who specialized in compliance consulting. I called under the guise of needing advice on local water management for my marine logistics business. Calvin loved explaining the technical side of things to anyone willing to listen, which made our conversation both informative and strategically useful. He told me dam operators had considerable discretion over water levels, entirely legal as long as the correct notices were filed and environmental monitoring requirements were met. Most people don't realize how much flexibility dam operators actually have, Calvin said, flipping through what sounded like a thick manual. It's all about documentation and timing. As long as you're doing approved maintenance and giving proper public notice, you can make pretty significant adjustments to water levels. It's essentially a matter of paperwork and environmental oversight. His words stuck with me. What began as an exercise in infrastructure management started to feel like holding the reins to an entire community's future. It was both thrilling and a little unnerving. He made it sound less like routine maintenance and more like legal authority over other people's most valuable investments. Setting up the company to buy the dam was easier than I expected. I created Carter Water Management LLC, keeping my personal name off the first set of documents but retaining full control. Granite Shore wanted out fast to dodge the looming compliance deadlines, so they were willing to negotiate heavily. 2 weeks later, I owned the very infrastructure that dictated water flow to every property on Mirror Lake, including the $7 million waterfront mansion belonging to Martha Crowley. Meanwhile, her legal team was ramping up the pressure. A letter from Susan Mertz felt like a direct shot at her word, sharp, dripping with hostility. Move your equipment now or face legal consequences. Every line radiated the same venom I'd heard in her voice during past confrontations. The letter threatened trespassing charges and accused me of unauthorized commercial use. When I called Susan to clarify the matter, I casually asked if she was absolutely certain about pursuing legal action over water rights. Her confident tone faltered, and she asked what exactly I meant. I simply said I wondered whether the HOA had done its homework on the regulatory landscape before taking such a strong stance. She ended the call saying she'd get back to me after consulting with her team. When Calvin inspected the dam in person, he confirmed it really did need maintenance, especially the bottom outlet system that managed lake levels during seasonal changes. The timing couldn't have been better. Maintenance work was typically done in the summer, when conditions were optimal, and could be scheduled with only 72 hours notice to county officials. Everything would be fully legitimate, authorized by the state, filed with the proper agencies, and carried out under environmental regulations. I wasn't planning to do anything illegal or even questionably, but I'd be lying if I said the timing was purely coincidence. Martha's big investor showcase was locked in for July 14th. She had planned guided tours of prime waterfront properties, banking on crystal clear lake views and perfect conditions to seal multiple $7 million deals. The photo shoots were set for 10 a.m., when the light would be ideal for glossy marketing images. Calvin assured me that submitting the maintenance notice 72 hours before a broken bar, filing the maintenance notice before July 14th would guarantee automatic approval from county officials, handing me a perfectly legal time window that lined up exactly with Martha's biggest day of the year. Late that night, I pored over Calvin's technical schematics. They didn't feel like ordinary engineering plans anymore, yet they looked like a playbook for something far more powerful than routine maintenance. The valve system alone gave me the authority to lower leak levels for equipment access and then restore them afterward, all within regulation. Environmental monitoring requirements meant everything would stay inside legal limits, but the visual effect would be devastating. Martha's picture-perfect waterfront showcase would turn into a tour of muddy shorelines and beached boats. I told myself it was strictly business. The dam truly needed maintenance, and scheduling it was my legal right. But sitting in my office with those diagrams on one side and Martha's investor event calendar on the other, I knew I was treading into dangerous territory. This wasn't only about recovering costs or securing lake access, it was about wielding legitimate authority for something that felt a lot like revenge. The real question was whether I'd have the nerve to pull the trigger when the time came. That Tuesday night, the monthly home meeting was packed. Every chair was taken, people lined the walls, and the live stream counter showed more than 200 viewers. Martha stood at the front, owning the room like she was center stage at a performance. The moment I walked in, I could feel eyes on me cold, measuring like I was prey surrounded by hunters. Looking back, I should have realized she had something bigger planned than a routine update. With theatrical precision, she called the meeting to order, her voice dripping with the false warmth politicians use before delivering bad news. Before we begin tonight's agenda, I want to address the unfortunate circumstances surrounding the bridge demolition. I know many of you have questions about the HOA's decision, and I think it's important that everyone understands the facts. Then she turned and gestured toward me, like I was Exhibit A in her trial. I kept my face calm, but mentally I was recording every phrase, especially the way she framed me as the villain in her story. Daniel Carter has been running a commercial logistics operation from his residential property without the proper oversight, she declared, her voice growing bolder as she warmed up. His wooden bridge wasn't just a safety hazard violating multiple codes, it created an unfair competitive advantage that undermined the standards we work so hard to protect. From the way she said it, you'd think I'd been running some back alley smuggling ring, not the same water transport business my father had legally operated for decades. Several people nodded along, a sign that her version of events had already taken root in the community. Then came the real performance. Martha switched the display to an expensive-looking presentation complete with architectural renderings, glossy financial projections, and neat, professional timelines. Her marina plan included 40 high-end slips, a clubhouse with a restaurant, and what she called managed water access for all commercial activities. HOA fees would jump by 40% after construction, and waterfront owners would also pay an extra annual fee for marina upkeep. I watched the faces in the room shift to first intrigued, then uneasy as they realized the financial burden involved. I understand the investment may feel significant, she said, softening her tone into the condescending patience people use when they want your money, but we must think long-term. This project will make our community the top waterfront destination in the region. Property values will rise by 15 to 20%, more than enough to offset your initial contribution. People were quietly running the numbers in their heads. Some looked hopeful, others looked worried about the long-term costs. In truth, Martha was asking the entire community to mortgage their future for her development dream and packaging it like a gift. Then she dropped the part that made everything click. Her voice took on an almost ceremonial tone. On July 14th, we'll host an exclusive investor showcase with guided tours of our most exceptional waterfront properties. This will prove our commitment to excellence and draw serious buyers who value a broken bar. Martha shifted to the next slide, revealing the tour itinerary paired with professionally planned photo sessions designed to capture the perfect light for marketing images. She stressed that several multi-million-dollar sales hinged on a flawless presentation, particularly the aerial drone footage showcasing crystal-clear lake waters and uninterrupted views. The way she framed the investor tour made it seem as though the entire community's financial stability was riding on this single event. She had extended invitations to luxury real estate developers, major investment firms, and what she described as high-net-worth individuals with a taste for premium waterfront living. The showcase would highlight 5 extravagant estates, each with a distinct architectural design and market tier, with the top properties listed between $6 and $8 million. It was obvious she had been orchestrating this for months, treating it as the decisive moment for her grand vision. During the QA, a resident raised a concern about the environmental impact of marina construction. Martha's calm, polished answer revealed how meticulously she'd rehearsed every response. She had already commissioned environmental studies, secured initial permits, and lined up contractors with niche expertise in waterfront projects. But what caught my attention was her offhand remark about working with regional water authorities to optimize lake conditions, and not just during construction, but for ongoing operations. She wasn't merely aiming to control the marina, she was positioning herself to manage the entire lake. When the meeting adjourned, Martha made her way toward me while people were still trickling out. Her smile carried the same calculated edge as a predator sizing up prey. "I hope you see this isn't personal, Daniela, it's just business," she said smoothly. "Once the marina's running, you'll have better facilities than that old bridge ever gave you. You might even find working with our system more profitable than staying on your own." It wasn't a suggestion, it was an ultimatum wearing the mask of a friendly offer. I simply told her I'd think it over, which seemed to give her the satisfaction of believing she had the last word. Outside in the parking lot, I overheard clusters of neighbors talking. Some were excited about the potential property value boost she promised, others were worried about the steep costs and future obligations. But the real takeaway was clear. Martha had positioned herself as the sole gatekeeper to the community's economic future. Her influence was absolute, and that explained her confidence when she destroyed my bridge. This wasn't just about that bridge anymore. She wanted control over the land, the people, and the water itself, and I had no intention of letting her succeed. The very next morning, I was outside the county clerk's office before the doors opened, paperwork in hand. I'd spent days combing over every document, each signature, each line of text critical. One slip-up and the plan would collapse. Calvin had walked me through every requirement twice, stressing that environmental filings had to be flawless or risk weeks of delay. The timing was everything. This was my single opportunity to set the plan in motion. Patricia, the clerk handling my case, had the patient, scrutinizing demeanor of someone who had caught countless errors over the years. She read aloud portions of the filing, flipping through Calvin's technical diagrams and environmental reports as if it were another run-of-the-mill request. To her, it was routine. To me, it was a calculated move with consequences that would extend far beyond her office records. Calvin's paperwork was airtight: water quality monitoring protocols, wildlife relocation procedures, even contingency plans for refilling if weather patterns shifted. The environmental safeguards alone filled more than a dozen pages, proving full compliance with every regulation. Patricia gave a few approving nods, jotting down notes and occasionally asking questions about inspection schedules and equipment. By the time she finished, the approval process for what seemed like a standard maintenance request was underway, an operation that looked ordinary on paper but had the potential to upend Martha's carefully laid plans. By 10:15 a.m., my public notice was officially filed and entered into the county database. Patricia handed me a stamped copy of the approval, explaining that the notice would be posted on the county website and automatically sent to the relevant environmental agencies. "You're all set for maintenance operations beginning July 14th, she said, sliding the document into what looked like a small mountain of similar filings. "Make sure you follow your monitoring protocols and submit the completion report within 30 days. I thanked her and walked out of the building, wondering if she had any idea what those maintenance operations were actually going to accomplish. The drive back to my office gave me time to think about what I had just set in motion. On paper, everything was legitimate. Calvin's engineering assessment documented real maintenance needs, and the work would be carried out under strict environmental oversight. But the optics? That was another story. Anna Dromanest's gleaming waterfront showcase would be transformed into a tour of empty mudflats and stranded boats, perfect for killing investor enthusiasm before it even started. I told myself this was strictly business, but doubt crept in. That afternoon, Susan Mertz called my office sounding like she was trying and failing to hide her panic. Apparently, someone had tipped her off about my filing, and she wasn't happy. "Mr. Carter, I need to understand exactly what you think you are doing with this damn maintenance schedule," she said. her lawyer voice wobbling between authority and desperation. When I explained it was routine infrastructure work under state regulations, she wanted to know why the timing just happened to overlap with the HOA's investor showcase. The irony was thick as she was asking me to delay legally required maintenance for Anna Dromonest's real estate ambitions. Her next move was classic overreach, threatening an emergency injunction to stop the work, accusing me of deliberately sabotaging a legitimate business. But when I asked her to cite the legal grounds for blocking authorized infrastructure maintenance, her confidence cracked. She hadn't done her homework. HOA authority doesn't override state water management law. The conversation ended with her mumbling something about consulting environmental law specialists. Translation: retreat. What she didn't get was that my documentation was airtight. Calvin had ensured every detail was in line with environmental protection rules, safety protocols, and industry standards. And the work was genuinely needed. The bottom outlet system hadn't been serviced in over 2 years, and some components were showing dangerous wear. Delaying maintenance could actually create liability issues. No lawyer in their right mind would argue HOA convenience outweighed infrastructure safety. The turning point came when Calvin called with disturbing news from his professional network. Anna Dromonest had reached out to 3 dam engineering firms, asking about acquisition procedures and regulatory requirements. She was clearly planning to buy the dam, likely right after her investor showcase brought in enough cash to close the deal. If she controlled both the marina and the dam, she'd control the lake, the water levels, and everyone's access to it. Suddenly, this felt less like revenge and more like survival. Late that night, I drove out to the dam and used my new access codes to inspect the valve systems. Massive steel gates capable of draining the lake in less than 24 hours. Environmental monitoring gear quietly tracking water quality, flow rates, and wildlife impacts in real time. Everything about the setup was meant for legitimate operations, but the visual impact would be devastating for Anna Dromonest's plans. Standing in that control room, it hit me. The papers were filed, but the real weight of the decision was still ahead. This wasn't just business anymore. 5:30 a.m., July 14th, Calvin and I stood at the dam as the first light of day broke across the horizon. The air was cool, the sky was clear, perfect conditions for maintenance. The monitor showed no wildlife or weather concerns to hold us back. Calvin ran through the final steps with calm precision. There was no turning back now. This was the moment that would decide both Anna Dromonest's future, a broken bar, and mine. I was about to cross a line I knew I could never return from. The question gnawed at me: was I really prepared to do this? Calvin's radio buzzed with steady updates from county officials as we began the precision steps of the maintenance operation. Environmental sensors tracked any wildlife movement, water quality monitors confirmed full compliance with discharge standards, and cameras captured every moment for the official record. We followed the approved plan to the letter, with Calvin checking in every half hour with regulatory agencies to log our progress. From a legal perspective, everything was flawless. The bottom outlet valves eased open without a hitch, and the controlled release sent water downstream exactly as specified for inspection and cleaning. Still, I'd be lying if I claimed the timing was pure chance. Anna Dromonest's investor event had been scheduled for that same day, complete with boat tours of luxury properties, showcasing immaculate lake views and calm, sparkling waters. Several multi-million-dollar sales hinged on that perfect image, especially the photography shoot timed for the ideal morning light. Calvin had confirmed earlier that filing our notice 3 days before would guarantee approval, giving me a lawful opening that just happened to coincide with Anna Dromonest's most critical moment of the year. With everything dependent on precise execution, the stage was set for a disruption she couldn't recover from. By morning, the lake had already dropped noticeably. Soon, sleek yachts sat awkwardly against their docks, and manicured waterfront views gave way to muddy banks and exposed lake beta details no real estate brochure could hide. I found myself checking my watch, mentally measuring how much more dramatic the scene would look before her photographers even arrived. Within the hour, the drop was unmistakable. What had once been a mirror-like expanse was now a barren stretch of muck. Docks jutted over empty space, and luxury vessels rested at odd angles like discarded ornaments. The glamorous, high-value views and a drama nest had promised were dissolving into something more like an abandoned construction site. Homeowners emerged, some staring in disbelief, others already on their phone as no doubt calling her for answers. I drove over to witness the fallout. Investors, dressed for champagne tours, were met with the stark reality of a receding shoreline. One, clearly a major player, stood on a deck that now overlooked cracked mud, her voice sharp as she demanded an explanation. Anna Drama Nest tried to spin it as a minor, temporary maintenance issue, but her strained smile told the truth. The unraveling was swift. Potential buyers snapped photos likely destined for social media as warnings about prime waterfront investments gone wrong. A high-profile developer cut her off mid-sentence with a curt, "Call me when you've sorted your water problem," before walking away. One by one, the luxury cars pulled out, leaving dust and silence behind. From my truck, I felt the cold satisfaction of watching her empire crumble. And yet, somewhere under that satisfaction, a small, stubborn doubt tugged at me. The press wasted no time. Local reporters were on the scene, filming stranded boats and frustrated residents. One man held up his phone to show footage of his yacht lying helplessly in the mud. "I paid $3 million for a waterfront home," he told the camera, voice heavy with disbelief, "and now I'm looking at a drain pit." The journalist nodded solemnly, framing the perfect narrative for a segment on failed luxury dreams. The shockwaves moved faster than I'd imagined. Agents canceling property tours, investors pulling out, and the showcase that was supposed to secure her future collapsing in real time. The updates coming in were grim for Martha's vision of perfection. Real estate listings were already shifting their language from pristine waterfront to lake adjacent, conditions variable, which was about as polite as you could get for what had become a muddy catastrophe. The community's elite image was evaporating almost as quickly as the water had drained away, and I could practically see the financial losses taking shape in real time as home values adjusted downward. Then Martha stormed into the facility. Her usually flawless presentation was gone, a hair tousled, suit wrinkled, her whole aura that of someone watching their empire crumble in real time. "You've destroyed us," she said, voice trembling with a mix of fury and panic. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Those investors are gone, property values, the marina project, everything we've built, it's all ruined." I held out the official paperwork, estate-approved documentation and Calvin's engineering reports. My voice stayed calm. This was routine infrastructure maintenance, carried out under full oversight. "It's completely legitimate," I said, showing her the county's stamped approval and the certified inspection requirements. The outlet system needed cleaning and inspection. We were following the regulations to the letter. Martha looked at the documents as if they were written in another language, probably realizing for the first time that her role as HOA president meant nothing when it came to State Water Management Authority. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd spent months trying to control every inch of lake access without ever learning who actually controlled the water itself. She'd destroyed my father's bridge without warning, assuming I had no power to respond. But she underestimated someone who understood systems, leverage, and the art of hitting the right pressure points with legitimate authority. By the time evening arrived, the HOA board meeting felt like the opening scene of a public execution. News crews crowded outside, ready to film every second of the collapse. Inside, the atmosphere was charged and hostile. The very neighbors who had backed Martha's marina ambitions now demanded to know how she could have been blindsided by scheduled dam maintenance and why she hadn't prevented what they saw as a deliberate strike against their investments. From my seat in the back, I watched her lose the room completely. 3 multi-million-dollar home sales had been canceled that afternoon. Lenders were re-evaluating mortgages, and at least 2 families were already talking about selling before the market collapsed further. The community's reputation as a luxury destination was unraveling, and everyone knew her miscalculation had made it possible. When Martha finally turned to me to speak, the air in the room shifted. All eyes waited to see what I would say. The room fell into a tense, almost staged silence as I rose from my seat, the settlement terms clutched firmly in my hand. Every eye tracked my movements. It wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was the start of Martha's unraveling, and I was holding the match. The dam work was carried out under state guidelines with full environmental oversight, I began, my voice steady against the charged air. That said, I'm here to propose a resolution that addresses the HOA's wrongful demolition of my father's bridge, as well as the business losses caused when you cut off my lake access without notice or compensation. I could see the realization spreading that Martha's destruction of the bridge was now directly linked, in the public's mind, to the disaster they were facing. My terms were direct and non-negotiable: a public, recorded apology admitting the HOA's unlawful bridge demolition and overreach, $250,000 in damages for business interruption and property loss, full funding for a memorial bridge in honor of my father's work and legacy, official seasonal maintenance schedules granting me operational control of water levels in accordance with infrastructure needs, mandatory disclosure in all future property listings informing buyers of seasonal water level changes due to dam maintenance. The last condition made the tension in the room spiky. The community's property sales would now depend on my operational schedule. Every listing would be legally required to warn buyers that the lake view could be disrupted for maintenance, inevitably affecting price and buyer interest. Martha's dream of controlling a polished, luxury lakeside image had completely collapsed. Now, her community would forever operate under the infrastructure rules she had tried to bypass. Susan Mertz tried to argue that $250,000 was excessive, calling it a simple access dispute, but the homeowners weren't interested in protecting the HOA's legal budget anymore. Several board members began openly separating themselves from Martha's decisions, admitting they were never consulted about the bridge demolition or warned about the risk of infrastructure pushback. The united front against me had shattered, and now they saw their investments tied to a feud Martha started without considering the fallout. Then I revealed the move that sealed her fate. During the lowered water period for dam work, I had completed a private cargo ramp, giving me independent water access with no need for HOA approval or a marina use. The silence was deafening as they realized Martha's entire strategy of cutting off my access to force me into her marina was doomed from the start. The bridge demolition had been pointless, her power an illusion. Political consequences came swiftly. Homeowners demanded to know how she could have picked a fight with someone who controlled vital infrastructure without researching the risk. Multiple board members immediately called for her resignation, citing gross misjudgment. The marina project was dead and no investor would return after seeing how easily the water situation could change. Martha's vision of a controlled lake environment had crumbled, leaving her personally accountable for the financial wreckage and the tarnished reputation of the entire community. When the settlement signing took place, it felt less like negotiation and more like capitulation. With cameras outside and an angry crowd inside, Martha signed each page as if sealing her own political obituary. The room fell into a tense, almost staged silence as I rose from my seat, the settlement terms clutched firmly in my hand. Every eye tracked my movements. It wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was the start of Martha's unraveling, and I was holding the match. The dam work was carried out under state guidelines with full environmental oversight. I began, my voice steady against the charged air. That said, I'm here to propose a resolution that addresses the HOA's wrongful demolition of my father's bridge, as well as the business losses caused when you cut off my lake access without notice or compensation. I could see the realization spreading that Martha's destruction of the bridge was now directly linked, in the public's mind, to the disaster they were facing. My terms were direct and non-negotiable: a public, recorded apology admitting the HOA's unlawful bridge demolition and overreach, $250,000 in damages for business interruption and property loss, full funding for a memorial bridge in honor of my father's work and legacy, official seasonal maintenance schedules granting me operational control of water levels in accordance with infrastructure needs, mandatory disclosure in all future property listings informing buyers of seasonal water level changes due to dam maintenance. The last condition made the tension in the room spiky. The community's property sales would now depend on my operational schedule. Every listing would be legally required to warn buyers that the lake view could be disrupted for maintenance, inevitably affecting price and buyer interest. Martha's dream of controlling a polished, luxury lakeside image had completely collapsed. Now, her community would forever operate under the infrastructure rules she had tried to bypass. Susan Mertz tried to argue that $250,000 was excessive, calling it a simple access dispute. But the homeowners weren't interested in protecting the HOA's legal budgets anymore. Several board members began openly separating themselves from Martha's decisions, admitting they were never consulted about the bridge demolition or warned about the risk of infrastructure pushback. The united front against me had shattered, and now they saw their investments tied to a feud Martha started without considering the fallout. Then I revealed the move that sealed her fate. During the lowered water period for dam work, I had completed a private cargo ramp, giving me independent water access with no need for HOA approval or marina use. The silence was deafening as they realized Martha's entire strategy of cutting off my access to force me into her marina was doomed from the start. The bridge demolition had been pointless, her power an illusion. Political consequences came swiftly. Homeowners demanded to know how she could have picked a fight with someone who controlled vital infrastructure without researching the risk. Multiple board members immediately called for her resignation, citing gross misjudgment. The marina project was dead and no investor would return after seeing how easily the water situation could change. Martha's vision of a controlled lake environment had crumbled, leaving her personally accountable for the financial wreckage and the tarnished reputation of the entire community. When the settlement signing took place, it felt less like negotiation and more like capitulation. With cameras outside and an angry crowd inside, Martha signed each page as if sealing her own political obituary. Property values eventually settled at around 20% lower than Martha's inflated forecasts. Yet, to everyone's surprise, prospective buyers appreciated the honest disclosures about lake maintenance schedules. The yearly operations calendar I put together brought clarity, allowing residents to plan their own activities around the predictable water level changes. Real estate agents now had straightforward facts to share, giving future homeowners a realistic picture of life in a managed lake community. At first, a few residents feared such transparency would hurt sales. But as the months passed, property values held steady and buyer confidence improved because they knew they were getting truth instead of a glossy sales pitch. Ironically, Martha's legacy was now a neighborhood that valued candor over hype, the exact opposite of what she had built her power on. During the bridge dedication, Calvin stopped by carrying thick maintenance logs and detailed engineering plans. He pointed to the blend of Robert Carter's traditional woodworking methods and modern water management systems, smiling as he said, "Your father would have been proud. You've honored his work and solved real problems for the entire community. That's engineering with purpose." As I gazed at the bridge connecting my land to the lake and standing as a memorial to my father, I felt the deep satisfaction of finishing the work he'd started. Strangely, the bitter fight had made our neighborhood stronger. Homeowners now understood both their rights and their boundaries. The newly elected HOA board operated openly, preventing any repeat of Martha's power plays. Property values reflected reality instead of inflated promises no one could actually deliver. The battle had proven that real strength in a community comes from mutual respect and cooperation, not manipulation and greed. When the crowd left that evening, I stayed a while on the memorial bridge, watching the light play across the calm water. The lake looked unchanged, but the people around it now grasped the delicate systems that made their way of life possible and the importance of respecting those who maintained them. Martha's downfall had shown us all, complex systems run best on trust and transparency, not force and deceit. The bridge would last for generations, a testament both to my father's craftsmanship and to our fight for fairness. For the first time, I truly felt I had honored his memory, and not just through the physical structure, but by securing a better future for those who stood with me. As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the water, I thought about everything it had taken to get here. Martha once believed she could control the land, the people, even the lake itself. But in the end, she proved a different truth. Real power isn't just about control, it's about understanding. She taught us that lesson the hard way. If you've stayed with me to the end, I'd love to hear what you think. Could Martha have saved herself if she'd chosen honesty? If you believe fairness and openness should always prevail, give this a like, and if you want to support, hit that little thanks button below. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right, and no matter how big or small the fight. That's it for now from Anna Dramanest. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications, and the next story might just be even bigger.